advice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it'll change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll.
Hi there, I'm Rob.
And I'm Matt.
And this is Dungeon Master of None.
Today we're bringing to you our first episode in what is will be a regular series, Unwanted Advice.
Yes, this is going to be the segment where we take the questions that you did not want us to answer, or hopefully at some point that you do want us to answer, and try to answer them using our extensive and impressive expertise on things that you want to know about.
I have been mucking through the depths of various online role-playing game and Dungeons & Dragons forums to find the questions that you have about your shitty games. So questions you have with DMing, with problem players, and we're going to try and help you out.
Bear in mind,
giving you advice you didn't want.
Bear in mind that Matt and I have both been playing together and separately since we were 14 years old. So we have both been and experienced and had to deal with all of those shitty players and DMs. So we are not perhaps uniquely suited, but absolutely qualified to give answers to these questions.
And as Glorfindel and Glorian once said to Frodo Baggins, advice is a dangerous gift to give, young hobbit. So if we're going to give it, so if our advice destroys your life, well, we're sorry. We're going to try not to let that happen.
Okay, what's your first question? Hit me, dear reader.
All right. Here is my very first question. It's a very typical one, and Robert has not seen any of these yet so far. All right, here we go.
I'm ready.
So, question writer has written, so I have a slight issue with a player. There are a couple of issues I seem to have with him. One, he does a lot of stuff on his own. Whenever the party travels, he wants to scout off on his own ahead of time. Whatever. This is fine. It's obviously not fine. However, when everyone camps down and establishes watches, he decides that he wants to go off on a 500 meter perimeter patrol on his own around the camp. This results in me rolling a random encounter and having 10 to 20 minutes dedicated to him solving the encounter problem, usually through his high stealth rolls. 2, he makes it clear that I am making mistakes without saying anything. The party encountered a baddie that is equipped with gloves of missile snaring. Now, this guy is a ranger that shoots arrows and caught baddie arrows in his gloves. Sorry, it's not the best written letter. However, I realized that this should only be on a reaction. This player pointed it out that I had been making a mistake. Okay, what do I do? Sorry, this is a poorly written letter with many usage errors. But there's our problem. What do you do, Rob?
I'm going to refer to the letter writer as problem player in Poughkeepsie because I don't know where they're from, and I'm just going to make it up, even though they're very clearly European. Matt, I'm sure you have some opinions of your own, but there's really two parts. There's two problems here. One, you have a player that likes to grandstand and go off on their own. So let's deal with the first problem.
It's a common problem.
It's a common problem. And there is one way to deal with this. Okay, there's two ways to deal with this. The number one way to deal with this is to say, you're slowing the game down. Don't do that anymore unless you have a really good reason to. Just put your foot down. It's a group game. If you insist on going off on your own, then you're making the game less fun for everybody else. You're, hogging the spotlight, and it's frustrating and annoying. Don't do it.
DMs are so afraid of, killing player agency or something by telling them, you could do that, but we all know you could quit being part of the adventure party and going to build your own bowling alley, but you don't. If a player tried to do that, I'd say, don't do that. You're trying to tell a different kind of story here. You can tell this player, stop going on your own. It slows things down.
This goes the same and or double for players who steal from their party. Yes, you can do that, and you're a sticky-fingered rogue, and you like to find your tiefling mitts or whatever, kinder hands inside the pouches of your allies. But maybe just don't do that. You don't have to do that. You can just do literally anything else because it destroys group cohesion. It annoys everybody. It's not fun or interesting. This isn't a Dragonlance novel. It's a game we're playing together. The second thing that you can do is kill the player. If they insist on going off on their own, kill them. Have them encounter too many orcs. They're wandering
and you're
around.
saying they get away with high stealth rolls? Give them a random, doing air quotes right now, monster that can beat their stealth.
Yeah, have them encounter something with blind sight, or tremor sense. Kill them. Don't do this the first time. But if they insist on doing it again and again and again, have them encounter something that's the right CR for a full party that has a way to detect them, and have it kill them. This is a perfectly reasonable way to teach a lesson.
They'll be afraid, and they'll want to stick with their cleric and wizard and all their buddies from now on. And I'd also like to point out, problem player from Poughkeepsie, that if you don't want the game being slowed down, you don't have to give them a random encounter. That's a choice you are making, right? Maybe you play in some kind of Gygaxian naturalist style GMing where there's always random encounters wherever you go. But if they want to scout, and it's perfectly fine to have a player scout ahead of a party, don't give them a random encounter all the time.
Yeah, I have players who are particularly interested in one aspect of their character, like maybe they're really good at identifying dwarven scroll work. And so they'll ask all the time, is there dwarven scroll work in this dungeon? And I'll say, no. Unless there's a good reason. If it's slowing the game down, or if we're trying to go somewhere and they want to examine the walls, I just say there's nothing there. That's an okay thing to say. On a related note, if your party insists on splitting, it is also a good idea. This is a similar problem. Kill them or cause them severe damage. Again, these are problems if you literally can't solve it. But let's move on to the second part of your question.
The gloves of missile
snaring. So your player has correctly identified that you misapplied the rules. This happens all the time.
Oh,
My players know as much about Dungeons and Dragons as I do, and if I get something wrong, they tell me. This does not have to be an issue. If it bothers you, set aside your ego. If the player is doing it to be disruptive or to, establish dominance like a gorilla, then, take them aside and say, hey, I appreciate your, you correcting me, and I want to make sure that I get this right, but maybe just let's keep it simple and friendly. If your player can't adhere to that, then that's a conversation that you need to have with them and with the rest of the party. But this doesn't have to be an issue. My players correct me all the time. It's totally okay.
You can just retcry and say, oh yeah, I shouldn't have done that. He shouldn't have been able to block more than one missile attack with his reaction per turn. If your players feel raw about it, or you can sense there's an animosity of the unfairness, well, point out, one, they just got a magic item. It's not as powerful as when the NPC used it, but you can also retcon that this NPC had a potion that let him use 2 reactions a turn for 1 minute, and he also had 2 more of them. Now your players have that, and they feel like, oh, okay, we earned fighting this harder thing.
Also, you make the rules. So if you have a guy who has 3 reactions a turn for some reason, and that is what you intended, or that's how the encounter was balanced, and your players are angry about that, well, don't abuse it. Don't change the rules arbitrarily to punish or overpower your players. But if you want to, if you create an item that doesn't strictly adhere to what's rules is written, that's well within your rights. And if your players just try to get you by saying they can't do that, well, that's not how it works.
All right, I have declared this problem solved.
Problem solved.
Go.
You're welcome.
Go DM and have no problems no more. All right, here is a question that is probably common question number 2. Here we go. In the letter writer's voice now. I find myself having fallen into the position of being, quote, always a DM, never a PC. With Xanathars out, I keep reading new subclasses that sound really fun to play, but know the likelihood of getting to play them is slim to none. How do you guys feel about DMPCs? Asking players mostly, but would love to hear from DMs who have run before. The PC would obviously be the same level as the group and in all likelihood have no magic items. I'm not looking into having a godlike character, more so to test out the new subclasses in action.
All right, so we're just going to call this Forever DM.
Yep.
Lever Writer is Forever DM, and Matt and I both have experience with this. I am a Forever DM. Matt was for a while, though I think he's managed to work his way into
some other DMs.
Being a PC. So the answer, and I will refrain from just ending it here. We'll go into it. But the answer for DMPCs is don't. Do not. Under no circumstances should you consider, employ, or create a DMPC. Do not do it.
I have not had a DMPC in one of my games since I was 15. It was a bad idea then. I saw how bad it was and how much fun it killed from your players, my players, and this will do the same. You are literally taking fun away from them when you do this. There's no right way to do it.
Now,
don't.
I will say that in rare circumstances, it can work. It is almost 99% certain that the circumstance that you want it to apply to is not one of them, and you will kill fun for your players.
Yeah. If you're the one asking whether I can do this or not, you do not fall in that 1% of circumstances where you will create a DMPC that will do it. Because your motivations are wrong, sir, or madam. Like your motivation of having a DMPC that you want to try out subclasses, that's the wrong reason and it will never succeed. And your players will feel like the game that was theirs and the options for storytelling and adventure that they could create is now they're just along for a ride. And you will kill your players' fun.
I once had a high stakes game where I had trouble getting a full team of players together every week. And so I created a DMPC for them that could not speak and literally just functioned as a heal bot. Even that was not great, but it was a functional and necessary thing to make sure that I didn't accidentally, murder them.
This was back in the day where, like, if you didn't have a magical healer in the party, things didn't work mechanically.
Right, and it was a question of having sometimes just 2 players or 3 for one a campaign that was balanced for 5.
And
also,
if you want to see these classes, and so your motivation here, and even better than that, right, is basically what Robert has made is not a DMPC, but more of a party cohort. Right. Cohorts or a follower are a time-honored tradition that have been part of Dungeons and Dragons and most role-playing games since its inception. It's perfectly acceptable for a party to have a cohort that listens to the entire party as opposed to one character. He's a servant of whatever group or organization they're a part of and follows their orders along. And the players have access to this cohort's character sheet and abilities, and they can tell them what to do, and this cohort will do that most of the time.
Curse of Strahd, which I'm running right now, has some characters that do function in a way similar to DMPCs, but they are critical to the campaign. They are generally less powerful than the players, and they serve a very specific function within the adventure module. And even then, I'm not a huge fan, but I can see the purpose behind that.
Now, Forever DM, we've told you your motivations are bad. Don't do this. But let me give like one additional piece of advice to Forever
DM, because there is an issue here that I do sympathize with, even though I am firmly opposed to DMPCs, and that they want to test out these new subclasses. Yeah. So what can you do to scratch that itch? What I do to scratch that itch is I create teams of enemies, or I create individual enemies that use those subclasses, and I give them personalities and I give them motivations, and I usually have some very exciting encounters. Some things I also do is I have one-off party allies. So they'll get in a fight in a tavern, and that tavern will have, a samurai who will end up being a contact and important piece of information. So he joins in the fight for one session. So that's a way to scratch that itch without committing to having a DMPC, which is the worst possible way to test out new subclasses.
There's one thing you can't do as a DM, is be a player character. So don't do that one thing, right? Create every other NPC in the world, have fun, explore that mechanical itch, and I hope one day you find if you play as a DM and you train your players up in being good at role-playing games, eventually one of them is going to want a DM. So stick with it, encourage them to be at it, and eventually you'll get to be a player too. All right, Rob, ready for another letter?
I'm ready for another letter.
Here we go. Quick DMing question. I had a player who failed a strength roll during our campaign and just wanted to roll again for another attempt. I said no to the extra attempt on the basis that continued rolls would eventually lead to a success. Is there a rule stating the number of attempts players may take on a specified task? As a DM, do you limit the number of attempts players can make? Is it one and done for you, or do you allow more? Curious as to how other DMs handle this.
This is actually an interesting question because I think that Matt and I may not have the same answer.
So I'm excited now.
The rules as written suggests that as long as many times as you want, you can retry that strength test. Now there's some caveats to that. Obviously, if you're somewhere where you're in danger and you just keep ramming your shoulder against that door until it opens, you might attract the attention of some baddies or trigger a random encounter. So that is a limitation on what people can do. Obviously, if the strength check is too high to ever make without, even with a natural 20, obviously they can never succeed. But I tend to be a little bit, I try to not be too gamey with this. So if my wizard, my frail gnomish wizard, is trying to break down a door and it's a DC 17 and they've got a -1, sure, technically if I let them roll infinitely, at some point they would be able to break down that door, but I would not let them just have it, because that breaks my immersion and I think is counter to the intent of the game. However, mechanically, if it's a door in the middle of nowhere and there's nobody ever going to come attack them, that gnome can mash their head against that door until it opens. So
you've got to, I think Rob's advice is perfectly fine, and you can follow that if you choose. You have a couple options on adjudicating these things, right? The crazy thing that you're going with now, which is an option that you've chosen at least for this time, and you can do it differently in the future, is that if a player tries to accomplish something with some kind of ability check and they fail, that means that this thing is just too hard for them, right? Which doesn't make a lot of sense to players and will probably frustrate them, right? If a fighter that is big and powerful tries to push open a door or pull open a stuck lever and they roll a 2, you rolled, well, they can't try again because they've already failed, which means that in the way your world works, that the difficulty of this thing becoming unstuck is determined by that very first check, right? If a fighter rolls a 2, that means it's really stuck, right? It's like your player is determining the difficulty of something with the first time rule. I think that's a crazy way to adjudicate. You need to take a step back and think about when you want to call for players to make a roll. You should, and we need to do a whole episode on this on the future about calling for checks and the dice to enter into the game, right? You only want to make players make a roll when there's 1, some chance of failure, and usually 2, some chance of a negative consequence for failure, right? Let's say the strength roll was for a lever that is stuck on the ground, right? It's rusted and stuck. I would only call for an actual strength roll if a fight was going on and the lever might close a door that would trap goblins or aliens on the other side that you're trying to get away from. But if players are just exploring, right, I would just say, well, what's your strength score? And they're like, oh, my strength is a 12. You're like, all right, it's going to take you a couple pushes. If you get a help from a friend, you can move it in about 10 seconds. Otherwise, you're going to push at it for a second, and then it's going to come unstuck, right? Because there's really, if they're in an empty room and a lever's stuck, there's no negative consequences. A player should keep trying until they really get a good grip on something and they move it, right? So you only want to call for your players to make checks when there are two things happening, right? One, there's negative consequences for failure. Two, there's some kind of time constraint, like a battle going on or they're in the middle of a chase. And it doesn't sound like from your letter, and a lot of things are left unclear, that either of those are the case. If they were the case, right, players trying to lift open a door, break down a door, pull a lever in the middle of that battle, you should absolutely call for a roll. If they fail the first time, they can choose next turn to waste their precious time and actions, which they could be using to fight or help their allies or heal or do something else, to try that lever again.
And one of the things, this, Matt gets to a good point, one of the things as a player that's most disheartening is that if I have a character that's particularly strong or agile or charismatic, and I'm given an ability roll, and this happens the most with strength. You know, this is written into Dungeons and Dragons that, you know, you need a certain roll to open doors or unstick levers. And I roll a 1, even though I've got a 20 strength or some nonsense, and I fail to do it. That is one of the moments when the game system clashes most aggressively with what my idea of what, you know, of the narrative that we're trying to build. So like Matt, I tend to, if I have a very agile or strong player and they're trying to do something agile or strong, have them make a roll but be extremely generous with it, or just give it to them. If they have an 18 strength, they just open the door.
Are you strong enough to open it, right?
Yep.
Strength says how much you can lift and move. It's like picking up weights. If you're this strong, you can pick up this much weights.
5th edition actually gives you a really cool tool for this, in that you can give them advantage. And you can give advantage for any reason you want. And if you think that somebody is just particularly good at bashing down doors, give them advantage. That may not solve your problem. They could roll 2 1s, but that's a good way to, within the game system, avoid this from happening again.
So, again, to go back to your questions, I personally, as a GM, for a check like this, right, like a strength check, I would, 1, not ask them to make a roll unless it was in the middle of danger or combat. And even if they were a really strong player and they rolled poorly, that would mean that, yeah, they could absolutely try again. I would, 1, not call for a roll in the first place, but if it was in combat or something where they might need to make a roll to unstick a door or pull a lever, I would let them try as many times as possible, and I would probably on the second try, give them advantage. Like the first try, you pull the lever, it budges a little bit, but doesn't move. You've broken the rust off of it. Next time, roll with advantage, and you will most likely unstick the lever. And if you don't, oh man, luck has played you a bad hand, and you're probably going to all get murdered.
Yeah. So hopefully that's helpful.
Right.
Again, you didn't do anything wrong necessarily. No. But this is one of the challenges of being a DM, is that the rules will sometimes do you wrong.
Yes, and always remember, don't make players make a roll unless it's absolutely necessary, right? They want to do something, have them do it. It's okay. You don't have to make a check for everything. Strong character wants to pull a lever. There's no time constraints. Yeah, they'll eventually pull it.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Okay.
All right, well, Godspeed. Weakling Woes. I forgot to give you a name.
Yeah, it's rolling on the. I have nothing. I have absolutely
we
nothing.
went with Weakling Woes. Weakling Woes, Matt. One last question before we.
One last question. Let me make sure I have a good one.
And this is a good time for me to say, if you happen to be listening to our podcast, and I don't know why you would be, because we don't have any listeners right now, but if you are, We would love to hear from you. You can email us at dmofnone@gmail.com. All of your questions, concerns, you can roast us for all of the things that we did wrong and the mistakes that we made. We love to hear from you. So again, that's dmofnone@gmail.com. Please email us your questions, your concerns, anything that you'd like to hear, any topics that you'd like us to cover, talk about how annoying our voices are, anything you want. We'd love to hear from you. So yeah, Matt, do you have one for us?
I do. I'm gonna ask Rob what kind of question he wants. Do you want a big, long one? Do you want a short one about campaign ideas? Or do you want another kind of adjudication question? This big long one is kind of crazy.
Let's save the big long one for our next segment, because we've been at this for a bit already, and I want to vary it up. I like the idea of let's ask about campaign settings. I want to hear this one. Let's get a good mix of questions for our inaugural unwanted advice section.
Okay, I admit I need help. I'm trying to DM my
the first step is admitting it.
Yes, you've done well so far. I'm trying to DM my first session this weekend, and it's going to be a one-time try. So my idea is there is a gauntlet that has been rumored to be hidden beneath the main city named Yavantis. The story around the gauntlet is it was used by the god of death, destruction, and madness when he fought the god of light and life. It's a gauntlet of immense power. So my problem is I want the party to find out in a way that fits with the god's theme. Any ideas?
Okay, so it's a god. I'm going to call this reader. I'm going to call this writer Gauntlet Guy.
Gauntlet
Guy. Gauntlet Guy.
We're gendering you, Gauntlet Guy.
Gauntlet Guy or gal. Wizard eats food badly. I'm sorry, I'm free roaming here. Let's get back to the topic at hand. All right, so it's a god of death and madness.
Yes.
In battle with a god of light. And you want the players to discover this gauntlet somehow organically, in a way that makes sense with the campaign and with the god's theme. That's an interesting idea. So there's a challenge here, and this is a challenge that both writers and DMs come up with, in that it is very hard to accurately portray madness in a way that is both fair to what it's actually like to struggle with mental illness, and that is interesting for everybody involved. So I'm drawing from the first thing that this makes me think of is the Elder Scrolls.
I was thinking of the fucking Avengers movie. Jesus, man. There's a gauntlet, and there's a god that loves death or something.
Oh, really?
I don't know. It sounds exactly like the Avengers.
I want to hear your thing.
I was just thinking, it's like, what's the weird blue guy played by the guy from No Country for Old Men, Josh Brolin's character.
Hey,
Thanos.
This makes me realize that I have no idea what I'm talking about, and that we're thinking of two different things. I thought that he was talking about a literal gauntlet that you would run through and have to compete a set of challenges. But now that we're talking, he might actually be talking about a physical metal glove.
I thought he was saying fucking a mitten.
So there's a. Can you read the question?
Yavantis.
Yavantis.
The city of Yavantis. All right, okay. You go with your gauntlet in the running through a challenge or a hardship.
Okay, so,
I'll go with the fucking piece of metal you put on your hand.
I thought that it was a dungeon, so the gauntlet was the dungeon that he wanted the players to discover. So what I was going to say,
wait, man, what if it's both? The dungeon's called the gauntlet, but there's an actual gauntlet in there.
All right, so what I was going to say was that perhaps the players on an unrelated quest or a semi-related quest could encounter a madman of some sort, ranting and raving on the streets. And if they pay close attention, he will drop clues to the location of the gauntlet. And this is what I was getting at with Sheogorath and the Elder Scrolls. Perhaps that madman could be the god of death and madness himself, trying to draw the players into his evil and inscrutable trap.
So there you go. This is actually a great idea. One, players are sitting around the tavern. You're saying this is a one try, so you want to recycle your NPCs because you won't get a chance to introduce new ones. A madman comes in. He has perhaps some strange, unexplained magical powers that he shouldn't have. The players, through his mad ramblings, are able to discover the location below the city they're in of a gauntlet, a dungeon of harrowing death and craziness, that at the end of there is this gauntlet, and that this madman is in fact an avatar or some incarnation of the god itself. And the reason he told the players this is he is in fact looking for someone to go down into the dungeon, retrieve the gauntlet, and bring it back up.
And perhaps
he is
this
banned
can be
by magic or something.
Yeah, precisely. He can't do it himself, or some ancient agreement between himself and the god of light and life prevents him from going down himself. You could use this. I know you said it was a one-off. It would make a great one-off. But if you wanted to,
you've got a nice little circle arc. Players encounter the madman. He gives them in his mad ramblings a very clear location of a short dungeon where the gauntlet lies, or some other temple that he is barred from going to himself. The players go to get the gauntlet for themselves because it's of immense power, as you say. Final encounter, this madman or avatar of the god is waiting for them when they leave the dungeon to try and steal it from them.
Precisely. And you can use it as a launching point into a larger campaign if your players like it and you have another chance, or it can be self-contained. So hopefully we understood your question correctly, because Gauntlet has multiple meanings, especially in a fantasy setting. But I think that there's actually some pretty strong ways to introduce organically a god of death and madness, and a way to make it interesting for your players to find out what he's after. Yeah.
All right, Godspeed, first time one shot DM. We hope your players have an exciting adventure in the Gauntlet of Yavanthus.
Gauntlet of Yavanthus. All right,
that's a good title.
So that's it for.
Are we done? We're at
We're at about 30 minutes. That's it for Unwanted Advice. Again, our email address is dmofnone@gmail.com. Please email us any further questions you have, any thoughts for other segments, anything you'd like us to hear or cover. We mostly talk about 5th edition, of course, but if you have other things that you want us to address,
send us those Pathfinder. They can be rule questions, adjudication questions, how to have fun, how to deal with psycho players.
We don't like to talk about it, but Matt and I have both played and run 4th edition, and we are happy to address those questions as well, though I don't know where my books are. But, we're equal opportunity here, inclusive, lovers of all editions.
Until next time, keep sending us your problems.
Send us your problems.
Been Unwanted Advice by DM of None. Yeah.
Over and out.
Press and stop. Over and out.
You better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll those dice. Man, life's so ill.